to Parshas Noach. Es ist Yedua, was Chazal sagen, the Gehe zu Noach, and we know that the Chazal tell us, the Chachamim tell us concerning Noach, and this is in Zohar and in other modern Mekayim that the Rebbe brings in the other one. So there it says, that Noach did not daven for the people of his generation. When David told him that there going to be a flood and destroy the people, he didn't daven for them. And the Lashon is, Leib Rachman alalma. He didn't daven ask Rachmanes, ask pity, which means daven for the world. Not like Moshe Rabbeinu, who did do it. He did daven when there were the people who made the Egel. The Eibishter wanted to destroy them. Moshe Rabbeinu daven for them, but Noach did not do it. And we find in the Zohar an argument concerning this Inyan that he didn't daven for the people of his generation, an argument with Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yitzchok. Rabbi Yehuda sagt, dass was Noach hat nicht mispalgen as even Moshe. Rabbi Yehuda says that this that he didn't Noach did not daven like Moshe is not given an Yin Shachasson. It wasn't something wrong, it wasn't something negative. Nor val Moshe leitola mila b'schusein or b'schusoves. Moshe could have davened for them because Moshe didn't daven, didn't connect it, didn't base it on his own merit. He davened that the Eibusher should protect the Yidden in the merit of the Ovis. Eis as Noach had gemoved, you can't tell us until say the Schus but Noach obviously could not have connected, base his davening on the Ovis. The Ovis weren't there yet. So he says, so the fact that he didn't daven is not a problem, doesn't show something missing in Noach. I schenke Rabbi Yitzchok halte, but Rabbi Yitzchok holds, as trotzdem, was Noach hat gedarft, trotzdem, was Noach gedarft, mispal seine Meire, sein Rachm, sein Osei. He also know it is a chesron. And even though he wasn't able to say the Schusovis, nevertheless, in spite of that, Noach should have davened and bring out Rachman by Hashem, pity of Hashem for the people, those people. So we have a machlekes whether this is a problem, a negative thing or not. And that is a katem avayadem tam. So the Rebbe says, my father, who has a beer on Zohar, explains the reason. Was Rabbi Yehuda ma'apich b'schus the Noach, for Rabbi Yitzchok behepech shema'apich b'chavosei, explains the reason why is Rabbi Yehuda look favorably concerning Noach, and Rabbi Yitzchok the opposite. He looks more negative on Noach's behavior. The reason is that the fire was because each one of the two speaks according to his own level. Rabbi Yehuda, this is all up Kabbalah. Rabbi Yehuda is bechinas chesed. We learn Kabbalah. Rabbi Yehuda represents chesed, kindness. The fire is a ma'apich b'schus chesed. That's why he looks for the favorably at Noach, because that's his midah. His midah is chesed. Chesed is kind. So he explains in a kind way that it's not something wrong that Noach did. When Rabbi Yitzchok bechinas gvura, Rabbi Yitzchok, according to Kabbalah, is the level of gvura, which is strictness. That's why he looks into the negative part of what Noach did, according to his midah, which is the midah of gvura. So that's why he says this is a negative thing. So Taket's explained that Kabbalah the reason why they did it. But the Rebbe says, we need an explanation. The Ozak from Torah, this is the Torah. A Mishnah Pirkei Avos tells us that you should judge every person favorably. It's given bepashtas aklal for yadaridin. Bepashtas simple shot. It's a rule for every yid. Even for somebody that his midah is gvura, he still has an obligation of judging everybody favorably. If he kumtas was Rabbi Yitzchok at Mahapach Noach, so how is it that Rabbi Yitzchok was looking to find the fault of Noach and he didn't judge him favorably? Like the Mishnah says you have to do. The fact that he was a good is a reason why he could do it, why he is neite. L'peil mamash, he still has to judge everyone favorably. So how does he judge him not favorably? Second thing, the dogma zwei days now for Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yitzchok concerning these, similar to these two opinions of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yitzchok. Gefind von Eicha Plukte, even Posek betchilas Parshasenu, Noach ish Tzadik, Gamer with the Reisov. Same machlek as we find here, but the fact that they didn't have for people. Do we look at it as a negative thing or as a positive thing? We find it concerning something else. In the beginning of the parsha, it says Noach ish Tzadik. Noach was a man, a Tzadik, b'day Reisov, in his generations. So the Rebbe is going to quote the Lashon of Rashi. Yesh merab b'sein the deishim eisel ishvach. Some of the Chachomim, they darshan this posik, they learn this posik in a form of praise for Noach. What is the posik saying? In his generation, he was a tzaddik. Imagine, had he been in the generation of tzaddikim, not the generation of Rishoyim, he wouldn't have been the bigger tzaddik. So by saying that he was a tzaddik in his generation, we're showing how great he was. Some judge it, darshan it, in an embarrassing way. But what does the pasuk mean that he was a tzaddik in his generation? According, in comparison to the people of his generation, he was a tzaddik. Had he been in the generation of Avram, it would have been nothing. So the fact that the Torah says with the race of the second way learns that it's trying to tell us that he was not such a big tzaddik, only compared to his generation of a tzaddik. Them is not moved now. So here too, we have the same similar question like before. Since we have a choice here, the fact that the Torah says it was in his generation, you could learn that it comes to tell you a praise of Noach, or you could come and tells us something negative about Noach. Why would someone say that the Torah wants to tell us the gnus, the embarrassment of Noach? If you could say the same words that means to tell us something good about Noach, why would we think that it tells us something negative? Nochman, it goes further. There's a rule, as I feel a big gnus behemoth meya leidiverakosim. It's the rule in the Gemara that even in the embarrassment, something negative about a non-kosher animal, the Torah doesn't say. The Torah nutznik aloshim v'gudna fila b'negei tzap b'ge'abheime. The Torah will not use a negative expression even for an animal. That's why the Torah says, instead of saying behema tmeya, a behema that's tomei, it says behema nenoteira, which is not toir, because it doesn't want to use the word tomei even on a behema. So certainly the Torah would not speak negative about Noach. So wie kann sein Adeya, the Torah is massive, the word by the race of Beleis Arus Bekrei Arus bringen an Yiddish Nai B'Shachos Noach. So how could even there be an opinion that the Torah added the word by the race of that it was in his generation only in order to tell you something negative about Noach? Why would the Torah do that? So we have these two places, we have the same type of question. The Rebbe says you could explain it like this. By first explaining was with Amolgim of Iron, when the Rebbe says I explain in different places. Look at the Sichas Chelikei and Chelik Yud, like the Rebbe quotes, refers to here in order 13 or 14. As a der klal, as Teira nutzen kein Loshem Megune, atzit sich to Sipurei HaTeira. This idea that the Teira does not use a negative term, even on a behemah, is only when it talks about stories of the Teira. But wherever the Torah is talking about a behemah or anything else to teach us a halacha, a din, dort nutze Torah Rosh Borur, there the Torah says it very clear. Even if the Torah has to use something that's not such a clean expression, the Torah nevertheless uses it, because the Torah has to make it clear. Halacha has to be said clear, a clear teaching, a clear lesson, to make sure that no one makes a mistake when they come to do the halacha. Because if it's not so clear, you use the words around, some people could say me something else. It has to be very clear. So if the Torah has to use the word tomei or any negative expression, Torah uses it. And the rule that it says that Torah does not use such expression is only when the Torah tells us a story about. And in the story, it talks about a non-kosher animal. Like for instance, in the Parshas Noach, it says how many animals, kosher animals came to the table, how many non-kosher. So there it doesn't say tomei, because there it's not a gate halach. It's just telling us a story. So there the Torah avoids saying a lotion that's not clean. Well, there is in the meaning of the Torah is massive the word with the race of mainly the klakein pirish look nice. So you could say that same thing, that when the Torah says that he was a tzaddik in his generation. So one opinion says that it's trying to tell you something negative, that only compared to his generation it was a tzaddik. So the same thing here. And that's what means like this. Then Torah will be gebracht odem gnai. Here it's negate to halacha. To say that what Noach did was not so good, he was not such a great tzaddik, has to be written clear, because it's negate to halacha. Why? If the Torah would not bring out this gnai, this negativity of Noach, will give an ort to hope matos negate halacha. There would have been a mistake concerning halacha, concerning how you behave. Why? We find things The Rebbe gives examples in Hora 16 from different Midrashim that Noach did things which shows that he wasn't such a great tzaddik. So if Torah would say, describe Noach as a complete tzaddik, and the Torah would not add that this greatness of Noach that we're saying was a tzaddik is only in comparison to his generation. But we can't mean that we would think that whatever he did is great. So we would think as that all the things that Noach did is a good behavior. And then we said things which are not. So here, in order to bring out how to behave properly, we have to tell you that Noach was not such a great tzaddik. To learn how to behave. Don't behave like Noach in this. I was a tzaddik. So the Torah has to tell you something negative about Noach to avoid people making a mistake. If it won't tell you, you'll think whatever he did was good, and really it's not so. So the Rebbe says now, so this is already an answer. By now it's already an answer. That the Torah, that you could learn that the Torah wants to tell us something negative about him in order to, people shouldn't make a mistake that everything did was right, and let's to bring out Allah. But now the Rebbe goes further. The Rebbe explain even more. That when the lotion of the Chachomim is, there are some people that darshan it for negativity, for embarrassment. It doesn't mean, these words don't mean that the Torah is trying to tell us that Noach was not so great. Noach had a chasaron. Only in this generation, compared to this generation of Tzaddik. That's not what that Rashi means. That's not what they mean. What they mean is, no, dershim means you could darshan, you could learn out from here. That means that other people could darshan it for gnai. Es is a droshe velimud l'gnai for atzveiten. There could be a droshe and a learning out from here that somebody else to learn out. So for hitni for nachason v'toz bam learning v'gneichen the Torah yidarshan l'gnai kedei to make sure that if somebody else might learn out from him something negative, we have to darshan l'gnai. So the word darshan is here, darshaning for somebody else. Not that really we're trying to tell you the gnai of Noach. We are doing that, but that's not what the Torah is trying to do. The Torah is trying to make sure that other people realize that he's not so great, so they won't follow everything in this. And the Rebbe goes in further, because you could say, and the Rebbe is going to show that really there's no machlekes here between the two opinions, whether the Torah tells us that Gnai or Lishvach. And in Orah 18, the Rebbe says, it's known always that we always try, whenever there's an argument between Chachomim, we always try to minimize it, to make the argument less, not to make it bigger. So here the Rebbe is going to show that really they're not even arguing. You could say, the Rebbe says, Ados was yesh eishen lishvach, yesh deishen liselignai, is nit kamplukte, but the gate that argus atzitkes v'neach. You could say that they're not arguing how great Noach tzaddik was. Similarly, Posheb Shat, you learn, the one that says lignai says that he wasn't such a big tzaddik. Saying that the Reisa was a tzaddik, but not compared to others, compared to his generation. The other one says, no, he was a big tzaddik. They're arguing in the level of how great a tzaddik he was. The Rebbe said it's not so. Each one is saying something else. They're not arguing. Each one is bringing out another point. They're not arguing in the fact whether Noach, had he been in the generation of Avraham, had he been as he was, would not been considered great. In other words, they both agree to this idea that he was not so great. Compared to his generation, it was great. Had he been in the generation of Avraham, we wouldn't be so great. Both agree to that. It's one thing. On the other hand, both agree. As nit Noach given schuldig was said, it's not given as a great tzaddik of Avraham. That he was not like Avraham was not his fault. Because eventually the matzav and the grace of Chisis was ein dor, because of the situation, and because how low his generation were. Had he been in the generation of tzaddikim, he would have been even greater. In other words, everyone agrees to these two sides. Everyone agrees that he was not the greatest tzaddik, and everyone agrees that had he been in a generation of tzaddikim, he would have been a bigger tzaddik. And what it means is that why wasn't he such a big tzaddik? Because it's not his fault. So they both agree he wasn't such a great tzaddik, the greatest, and they both agree it's not his fault. The chilik is, so what are they arguing if they agree? What is the Torah's intention by adding the word b'dereisav? Because the word b'dereisav could be intent to stress one point or stress the other. Eiman Domer zog dem Schwach, the Teire kum Shabbat Neach. And one opinion says that the word with the race is coming to praise Noach. And what are we saying? Noach. We're praising him. That even in such a generation like him, like this opinion that says the Shvach, that even in such a generation, he was a tzaddik. Certainly in another generation, the better one, he would have been even greater. So the Torah is trying to stress that praise. And the zweite Mandomer zog, the second opinion says, as a meat will Torah bavoren, and zol nit aruskom and kentakol, and the Rabbi of Naidin is land for Gnech. The second one says, no, it's trying to tell you the Gnai. It's trying to teach you that he was not such a great person, to make sure that no one else will learn from him. So they both, so the first one said the Torah is just trying to tell us this important of Noach. That Noach, they agree he wasn't such a great tzaddik. But nevertheless, we're trying to tell you what Noach was. That Noach was a tzaddik. Compared to his people, he was definitely a big tzaddik. He could have been a bigger tzaddik. So we're trying to stress that point. The other one that says that Torah is trying to tell you the Gnai means it's trying to tell you that he wasn't such a big tzaddik. Trying to stress the point that Itaka wasn't such a big tzaddik. Why is it important to stress that? So other people will know that not everything he did was so good, and therefore don't copy everything that he did. Und das meint, this is the pshat. It says that some people darshan it to negative. The Shaykh zum Nechen Gufi does not continue from Neich. When some say that Torah is trying to teach us a Gnai, an embarrassment of Neach, it's not like Abba Neach himself. Why is it not a Chasson? Because eigentlich in Asad Dor is nicht even Shaykh as saying the Darges Tzidkes Avram. Being in such a generation, it was not possible even he should be in any level of a tzaddik like Avram Avinu. So why is the Torah? So it's not his fault. So we're not trying to say that an embarrassment on Neach. Nor Torah muss bringen as the Darge in Tzidkes is nicht the Emes Shleimus. The Torah has to tell us that what he was is not the highest Darge. The other Rabbis is a Darge from Gnai Berach to Avram. Compared to Avram, you should know it's nothing. It's low. Why did Torah want to tell us that? They have the Yerah from Sipur Neach. So the lesson we take from Neach should be clear that don't be like Neach. Certain things that he did. So there are two things here. We want to show how great Neach was, because people would show him, and he was a tzaddik. So that's what we're stressing. That's why we're saying that it was only in this generation of a tzaddik. He really wouldn't be a tzaddik. But on the other hand, so one is trying to say the shvach that he was a tzaddik no matter what, and the other one is trying to say that he wasn't such a great tzaddik, but not because we're trying to say a gnai on him. We're trying to say no gnai, nothing negative should come out by others. Demselben Leben came a masbers on the 2 days for Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yitzchak and them was Neichot nicht mispal gwel al day. Same way you could explain the other machlekes, the two opinions between Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Yitzchak, whether the fact that Noach didn't daven in this generation, is it a problem or not? And as we said before, that machlekes is Rabbi Yehuda holds that was not a problem, not a chasodin in Noach. He couldn't daven. There was no schus ovis. And Rabbi Yitzchak says he still should have davened. So he says like this. He says, the same thing. There's no argument here. Rabbi Yitzchak is made that das Neich nicht mispal werden an Shdeires, weil in jener Matzev nicht gekannt mispal sein auf sie. Even Rabbi Yitzchak who says that it's a chesed Neich, something negative about Neich, he didn't daven. He agrees that he couldn't daven. He knows that the reason he didn't daven is because he had no choice. He says, he didn't have anybody to hang on the schus like Moshe. Moshe had to hang on the schus on the others, and he didn't. So he also agrees on the chesed Neich. But what is Rabbi Yitzchak saying? That there's something he should have davened. Rabbi Yitzchak kommt nor bavoren, and Rabbi Yitzchak coming to tell us, as a zolita rus coming at akol chas v'sholom and ashpetetik door, should be no stumbling block, no mistake in the later generation. Mainly, people might think, as he's not kin chasor, and he's not mispal of an shador. People might think, looking at Noach, and if you'll look at Noach and say Noach didn't daven, so people will, okay, that means you don't have to daven for others. The Rebbe Yitzchak says, I'm a mus darshanen. We have to learn this. And Rebbe said, what does learning mean? We have to bring out from this story, the fact that he didn't daven is a problem. Not that it's a problem on him. He had no choice. He couldn't daven. But this brings out that the etzem zach of not davening for other people is a problem. You have to try always to daven for other people. Und der Vater ist das, Rabbi Yitzchak, nicht in Stire zum Klal, aber don't call them a schus. So the opinion of Rabbi Yitzchak is not a contradiction to the rule that you have to judge everybody favorably. Weil Rabbi Yitzchak is by Noach nicht gewinnt kein Chayve, chas v'sholom. Even though he says he should have davened, it's not that what he's saying negative about Noach. He knows Noach couldn't daven, so it's not negative about Noach. Nor aber warnend, wie die Sache ist, an ihn shal Chayve by andere. He makes sure that this should be looked upon as a negative thing by other people later. Not only doesn't matter that he said it, because it's not saying anything negative about Noach. The contrary. If you would not make sure to say that such a behavior of not davening, generally not davening for others, is not good, if you wouldn't mention that, that would have been a negative thing about Noach. What would we have said? If we wouldn't make sure that people know that this is not a good thing to do, not to daven, if we wouldn't make sure of that, then people will think that, so it will be a hagi of Noach. Why? It'll be something negative about Noach, because if people will think, because of what Noach did, people will think it's okay. That's not good for Noach. In other words, Noach doesn't want that people should say what he did was good. Not that he did something wrong. He didn't do wrong because he had no choice. But he wants that, for his benefit even, that no one should think that you're allowed to be that way. And the Rebbe does so the fact that he said that Noach should have davened and he didn't is a merit for Noach. We thought it was a chayv. Say, oh, Noach didn't daven, he should have davened. No, that's good for Noach. Noach himself wants that you should daven for the people of generation. He wants that the Chomim should darshan and bring out the idea that it's a mistake in Noach. He wants that. Like Rabbi Yitzchak Taka says, Noach should have davened. Now, Noach couldn't have davened, but he wants that people should think that he did something wrong. And then they will not learn from it. And that'll be good for him. To make sure there's no mistake by others. So it's a schus for Noach to say that what he did was not good. Because we're not saying that what he did was not good. That inyan is no good. He wants us to say it, and that'll help him. And in Order 23, the Rebbe says another example where we find such a thing. It says in the end of Brocha, when Moshe Rabbeinu passed away, it says, Vayifku b'nei Yisrael, that the Eden cried after him. So Rasha says that by Aaron it says, Vayifku kol b'nei Yisrael, that all the Eden cried. So Rasha says, why? Because by Aaron, who was always trying to make peace between people, everyone cried, men, women, everyone cried. But by Moshe, not everybody cried. So the Rebbe asks, at the end of Parsha Brocha, where this says, is the place where it talks about Moshe Rabbeinu. It talks about the greatness of Moshe. Why would it be important in the time when we're talking about the greatness and praise of Moshe, well, Hakaran, that he was not like Aaron. Aaron was different, better. So the Rebbe says, it's not the chat. Why Moshe didn't do what Aaron did? Because that wasn't his job, or whatever the reason could be. But Moshe is afraid that people will look at him and think they have to behave like him. It's good for Moshe that people should know that this is not the tachlis, there's another Madrega Lakan. So when Moshe passed away and we're trying to give schusim for Moshe, there the Torah mentions, the way Rashi explains, that Aaron was Eyev Sholem, and there everyone cried to bring out the milas of Aaron. And that's a schus for Moshe. And the same thing with Noach. By saying that what Noach, Yitzchak says that Noach should have davened, is a good thing for Noach. It brings out his chesed. It doesn't bring his chesed because he had no choice. But it brings something good that nobody will make a mistake after him. So he is happy about saying that. But by making sure that what Noach did is not something that's negative, and people know, so we make sure that what Noach did is an inyan shel something negative. Something is negative. Need to shleim with negative and doesn't mean bad, but it means it's not complete shleimus. That's what we're saying. The fact that he didn't daven is missing something, even though it's not his fault. So it's not a chayva on him, but the inyan is a chayva. So this makes that in later generations, everybody does daven for the people. He does gufa misak and does his neich ad bepeil nigeton. That is a tikkun. That fixes what Noach didn't do. Afal pi as bedeira das nicht gekannt. Hat das nicht gekannt durchführen. Even though in his generation, he could not have done that. The Baldaber Ados, as durch him. But because through him, the says Becharuz bringing the Azar Nog is not gemeide, by bringing out that this behavior it is not so good. That's a lesson for all generations have to daven. But Mele bringt us to the shleimus in the meaning that helps Noach too. Noach missed out something. Not his fault, you can't blame him. But the fact is he was missing. But if through writing that it was missing, other people will not follow, and other people will daven, that helps Noach, that is misaken, the thing that he's missing, and he also is not missing it. That's the lesson in actual behavior in our generation. Sometimes it happens, a person tries his best to be mashpia, to influence his surrounding people from his generation. But certain reasons are not dependent on him. Sometimes you're not successful. You can make a cheshbon to yourself. Well, I did everything I could. For myself, what I'm supposed to do, I did. Not only what I have to do in my own personal avodas Hashem. Even trying to work with others, I did the best. I didn't accomplish. This needs it's not my chesaron, which is exactly like I said before. Lernt Rabbi Yitzchak Hayeros. Rabbi Yitzchak teaches a lesson. As es kennt tak sein, as Rodbem is getan, before gekent. Could be that Yitaka did everything possible. It's not only that he thinks he did everything probably perfectly. Yitaka did everything. He did everything he's supposed to. Of Alpha became davon wissen, as dabei Tormen nicht bleiben. You have to know that you don't have to stop there. Never stop. As much as you tried and you couldn't, don't stop. But Tormen sein zufrieden von der Matze, von der man muss halt in ein Macher sein. You can't be happy and satisfied with the way it is. You constantly have to announce, like the Loshen to say, much as he couldn't, it's not his fault. You still say you should have davened. The need bet rachmal is a massive shcheva. Not asking rachman for other people of his generation is a cheva, is a negative thing. Those gufa is gave him as ovena massive from schus, and this itself become because other people learn that it's not good. The mamela they do help, they do daven for others. So it makes it should be a schus at the Reibish as mevatel the sibis from the matzah built terotzi. It's a schus mamela Reibish takes away all those reasons that cause not to be successful. That allows, gives the opportunity to eat. Every Eid should be able to daven before he eat. It's not his fault he couldn't, but if you know that this is not good, David will make it that you should be able to daven. Be supposed and until the pale they should do tshuva. Especially in our generation, which is right before Mashiach. But the Rama Pas can be Sifre, the Halachas, Rama Pas in his Sefer, which is Sefer Halachas, and Halachas means it has to be, as if Yiticha Teira, Sefer Yisrael, Lasa Tshuva, B'Seif Gelusam Yad and Golin, Teira promised that at the end of Golus, they were all the Tshuva, and they were all go out from Golus, they will be redeemed. And this is by helping others come back, even though you feel you can, but if you know that it's wrong, Davish will help you. It reminds me just of a story that the Rebbe told once about the Rebbe Rashab, that he once, they taught this, but the Rebbe Rashab, that there was once something that he very tried by Nasifis Harabonim to accomplish with the government, and wasn't Matzliach. And it was the Nasif of a lot of Rabbonim. Reb Chaim Brisker went into the Rebbe Rashab later, and he saw him crying. He said, the Rebbe said like this, Rebbe, why are you crying? You know, like Geton also says, we can't. We did everything. Not that we didn't do it, we did everything. So he said, but we didn't accomplish. So it bothered him, it didn't accomplish. I don't know the end of the story, but probably then it was accomplished. There's another story that Rebbe told similar, but in Chofetz Chaim, he once sent a delegation to some ishtadler, to some officer in the government for something. And they tried, they didn't accomplish. They came back and they gave a report to the Chofetz Chaim. So the Chofetz Chaim asked him, did you faint? In other words, you felt you did that, and that's it. It's okay. And we did ours. Did you faint or the other? And the Rebbe didn't say this, but probably had they fainted, it would have accomplished. So we have to know that never to give up.